Hi folks. How are you? My name is Akash, and I'll be taking today's interaction with you on the topic of transitioning from product management to product leadership in the new age. Before I start, I hope I am audible. For any questions, for any discussion, you can use the Q&A section, and you can put your queries there, and we'll keep on answering them as we go along. And we also have a formal Q&A at the end. So any question that you have, happy to answer that once we have done the entire discussion. So I hope I'm audible. You can, if I'm audible, just put your points in the Q&A, and we will start the discussion. I would also like to keep on understanding the profile of the participants today. So while I talk about the topic, happy to also talk about uh, some aspects that may be more relevant to you. So you can also keep on talking about what you do currently or any experience that you may want to share. So use the Q&A section for that. So, okay. So a bit about me. So my name is Akash Kansal, and I had the rental product at 99 Acres, which is an InfoEdge company. I'm sure you have heard of Naukri.com. So InfoEdge is a parent company of Naukri.com. It's a listed company, and that they have a revenue of roughly 1,300 crores. And previously, I was working with Droom. Droom is a consumer internet unicorn, and today an IPO-bound company. Dealt specifically in automotive e-commerce, and it was a purely e-commerce-led model. I worked there for roughly 3 years, and in general, I have around 10 years of experience across startups, MNCs, and consumer internet companies. I have had the opportunity to lead large teams, also lead platform-wide projects, and also worked on P&L responsibilities. Uh, a bit on my other side of the profile as well. So I'm an author, and I have written India's first season style book. It's called The Class of 2006. It was launched by R. Madhavan at IIT Kanpur this January. And the book is about 18 small learnings from college life that can help you outperform in your corporate life. So if you get a chance, you can get a copy from Amazon at only 100 rupees. So yeah, folks. So this is a bit about me, and as we proceed next, so just a high level overview of what we'll cover today. So one is, of course, the topic has three elements in itself. One is transition, other is product management to leadership, and third is new age. So we will talk about them in the form of a case study. Okay, and the idea is that you can put yourself and appreciate the topic while you are in your, let's say, in your daily life or working in a corporate life. So we'll talk about first what is the ladder like, what is the product management ladder like, let's say in India in different companies. Second, what does transition mean? Okay, so what does transition mean? Third is when you transition, what are the different aspects you need to cover? So what is the shift you need to enhance or look at? Fourth is what are the different competencies and skills that become very important when you transition and you need to focus on them? And of course, lastly, we'll talk about any other question that you may have during the Q&A section. Folks, happy to answer any question that you may have, and keep on putting your points in the Q&A section. Happy to take them as we move ahead. So, as I mentioned, so let's talk about let's say talk about an employee called Ravi. Okay, so Ravi is a senior product manager at Zipcart. Okay, I'm sure you recognize the resemblance here. And he's looking after the buyer experience module. Okay, he has 8 years of experience, a stellar individual contributor. Okay, he's done a lot of things for himself. He is doing really well, and he has two direct PM reports. Okay, so SPM or a senior product manager, he is today in the product management role, and this appraisal cycle, he got promoted to director. Okay, which is part of the leadership role at Zipcart. He's happy. Okay, he's really happy. He wants to do more work, and he's now reporting to the head of product, who's a VP there, and now of course he has more modules and more PMs to lead. So now the next question is, what does Ravi do? Okay, he's happy, he has got promoted, and therefore he's now transitioning from a product management to a product leadership role. So what does he do? And that is what we'll talk about today. So hope you can appreciate that the position Ravi is in. He's transitioning from a PM to a PL role. So as I was talking about the hierarchy in a typical product organization, while different companies have different titles, designations, okay, and a lot of companies like Google, Microsoft have different methodologies as well to talk about the designations. But what you see today and in this picture is a typical hierarchy. Okay, at an entry level, in most companies, you will start as a junior product manager, as an analyst or a designer. That's a typical entry level today. That you go on from either from a graduation degree or let's say a post graduation degree, and then of course you move on to an IC role, which is basically where you start leading a certain project and delivering for the company. You report typically to a director or a SPM, senior product manager, and of course the hierarchy as you move ahead, as you see, move ahead to a vice president or a CPO. Okay. Now each company may have a different structure. For instance, let's talk about Zipcart. Now Zipcart has a lot of categories. Okay, it's a e-commerce platform. So let's say you have mobiles, you have let's say books. So all these are different categories. So typically a chief product officer will be leading all the categories. He will have multiple VPs that report to him, and then each VP will have certain directors reporting to him. Okay, and each director will of course then have a different organization that reports to him. So as you can see, the typical level below a director is a PM role, where you are more of an individual contributor. But as you move ahead, become a director and above, you will call yourself as a product leader. So any questions till now? If you want, you can put down in the Q&A box, and happy to answer. But as you can see, Ravi is here right now. He has just become director, and he was earlier a senior product manager. So he's transitioning now from an individual contributor to a leadership role. And that is what, of course, we'll talk about today in terms of how does it change things for Ravi. Okay, so as you can see here, at a larger organization level, there are multiple portfolio of projects or categories that the VP or a CPO is leading. Okay, there you can call them the top management or the top leadership. Now they are going with a product vision. So let's say Zipcart wants to be the best e-commerce company in India. Okay, they want to serve 50 categories and they want to gradually expand or say go to international markets as well. Now that is what we call a product vision is. Okay, and then of course it leads to creating different visions. Let's say I want to achieve 2x growth, or let's say launch 2 categories this year. So that is part of the mission or the charter of the VP or a CPO. That leads to a portfolio level planning, and therefore Ravi, who is now at a program level or let's say at a director level, has to develop a roadmap or a project backlog that will enable his entire team to meet that entire objective or vision. So as you can see here, this is the roadmap, and this is Q1, Q2, H2, or let's say half yearly plan. So typically, you need to develop a roadmap around what we need to do this particular quarter or let's say half year, and you need to define what projects you'll pick up. Okay, that projects ultimately will be given to your teams. What let's say we call it a feature team. That feature team is ultimately executing the projects. So now Ravi has moved from a team level to a program level, and therefore now he has to work on defining what projects he need to pick so that he can meet the objective of the company. Okay, so from a IC where he was leading a different module, there were certain PMs reporting to him. Now he moves on to decide which projects that these PMs need to do. Okay, so you can see what changes is his scope changes. His work moves from an individual role to a leadership role where he defines what projects the team needs to do. So every company may have a different charter, but of course, this is a typical way Ravi will need to also operate in this company. So as I was talking about what changes for Ravi. So first thing what changes is the depth. Okay. So earlier he was very deep. Let's say he was, as I mentioned, he was reading buyer experience module. Now buyer experience module, let's say, has different touch points on Zipcart, where he has metrics of improving buyer experience, which could be across the different funnels, acquisition, activation, retention, or let's say any kind of funnel. Okay, so here's let's say metric was increasing the retention rate of people coming back to buy from Zipcart. Okay, but now what we have seen is that his breadth is changing. He has to lead different modules across buyer experience or even seller experience. So first and foremost, the biggest change is the depth is now changing to a wider breadth. more modules, more problems, and therefore more different issues to solve. That is the biggest change he will have to focus on. Second, I talked about Ravi being a stellar performer. He was very good at his job, but now he has a team of 6 to 8 PMs working under him across 3 to 4 modules. And therefore, he will need to work on the output on these different PMs as well now. And therefore, he needs to train them, guide them, make the KRS very, very clear. Okay, so for him, he needs to be very elaborate and articulate in talking about the goals and KRAs of each member, so that ultimately the cumulative delivery is adding up to his own charter or roadmap. So that is again a very big change, because he was making his own plans today, but now he has to make plans for 4 to 8 team members that ultimately will report to him. Third, earlier it was about, okay, I have 2 PMs, I want to achieve this, I have 3 months, and I want to achieve this particular metric in the next 3 months. Okay, it was about solving the resources you had earlier. But now you have to allocate resources. For instance, there are 2 PMs in this team, and you want to do more projects in the other team. So now you need to allocate projects from one team to the other, and you need to also influence other people to tell them that why it is important. Okay, so you have to influence people under you, influence people on the top, and therefore you have to ensure that the work is done in the time available or deadline given to you. So earlier the resources are given to you. Now you are taking the resources on behalf of your team and allocating them to ensure that the work is done. And fourth, earlier you were thinking about your own growth in the company. I want to become a director. I want to do this kind of project, and therefore it was more about your personal scope. But now it is about organizational scope, what the company wants. So let's say the company earlier was talking about moving to different geographies. Okay, but now for you it was a different project. But now it is your important priority that the company together as a whole is ensuring that they move towards that particular goal. And therefore you move from a personal scope to an organizational scope. Okay, so you see a lot of things change for Ravi as he transitions, and all these things are very important as we move along from this hierarchy to the other hierarchy. So for here, I will pause and look at any questions if we have. And okay, I have a few questions. Okay, so one thing I think what I understand is right now I think we are fine. So hopefully I'm not moving too fast. So if you want me to pause, you can let me know anytime. And so now let's move to the next section where I will talk about these things in detail. Okay, so a high level overview has been given to you. Now let's see what Ravi has to manage to be successful in this company and transition in the new age. Another aspect I would like to talk about is the new age aspect. In the last 20 or 15 years in India, a lot of startups have come up. Whether it's Flipkart, Uber, or let's say any kind of unicorns have come in India. More than 85 unicorns today, of course, are existing. So they've changed the way people look at startups or let's say product management. A company like Google, Microsoft, or let's say even Facebook will have a very different structure. They will, so of course, they pick up less projects, they deliver on them over a period of time. They do alpha testing, beta testing. There's a lot of work that goes on to releasing one project. But the new age philosophy is where I need to deliver very fast. Okay, I need to become, let's say, from 100 crore to 500 crore company in the next 3 years. So, which basically means that a product manager also has to evolve very fast. The promotions are faster, delivery is faster, expectations are higher, and therefore the new age comes with its own set of issues and problems that we need to address. So, of course, Ravi today is in India. His philosophy of work is very different from, let's say, what was in Google, let's say, 10 years back in the US. But yes, this is how we need to adapt and evolve, and in general, shape the entire economy towards a larger paradigm shift. So let's talk about transition one. Okay, so first is that, as I mentioned, he has to move from a PM to a leadership role. First thing he needs to do is extend his perspective. Okay, first understand what's the overall strategic priority of the company. So let's say, as I mentioned, Zipcart wants to be the leader in e-commerce in India in the next, let's say, 10 years. That's the vision. Now, every action that you do should add up to that entire vision. Okay, and therefore, whatever you're suggesting, the projects you're selecting, or the roadmap you're building should add up to that. Okay. Second, you need to understand the team capabilities. Okay, so let's say I have 3 members and let's say the person is good in, let's say, payment section, but I have to work towards category management. In that case, I need to align or let's say build the capabilities of the team either through hiring, training, upskilling. Okay, so you need to first understand if I have to achieve that, what are the capabilities today? Because if I don't know, of course, then in that case, I will have to understand that there might be a delay in terms of the progress I'm able to make. Okay, what I can deliver in 3 months, I may have to deliver in 6 to 8 months, which may not be good for me and the company. Third, wider view of the product lifecycle. Now, not every product is a 0 to 1 problem, right? So you are building something, let's say, the last 3 years, and the 0 to 1 phase is done. Now we're talking about growth. That's a 1 to 10 problem. But there will be some issues, or let's say new product releases that will be 0 to 1. So you have to understand each product will be in a different life cycle, and therefore different approach needs to be followed. So let's say earlier you were a 0 to 1 guy. Okay, you are building products. You like building products. But now as a director of product, you have products which are already built, products which have been launched earlier. You have to scale up from let's say 100 people to 1,000 people, or let's say one crore revenue to 100 crore revenue. So not every problem is the same, and therefore you have to extend your perspective there. When you pick up projects, you have to do a business case. Okay, a business case is where uh, which let's say there are three projects, project A, B, and C. Which project should I pick first? There is a business case which aligns what is the overall business impact of this entire project in the overall vision, and that is where you have to do a business case. Earlier, the manager was doing for you. Now you are the manager, so you have to understand that let's do this because this has more impact in the overall vision, and you hold the responsibility of the overall implementation at your level, so that you can lead your team to work on the right ones at the right time. It is very important. Okay, I can build new projects, but if I'm not able to scale them up to the next level, then I won't have the let's say the funding or let's say the credibility in the organization to lead newer projects. So for the biggest thing that you need to extend your perspective and move from a manager to a leadership by thinking big and coming up with a strategic picture. Okay. Uh, okay. So while I move ahead, I see some questions coming up in the Q&A. Okay. So we'll take them as we move ahead. Please keep on pouring your questions here, and we'll take them at the end, or let's say in the middle as I move to the next transition. So one is, of course, now you know that the perspective has to change. The next part is the projects that you choose, the ROI has to increase. Now, what do I mean by ROI? ROI is return on investment. Okay. So let's say I have different assets in my organization. Let's say in my team, I have 3 product managers. Now each product manager may draw a different salary, may have different KRAs, but at the organization level, you are looking at them at the focus of let's say how much PNL are you delivering. Let's say there are 3 PMs, and let's say your PNL is 10 crores. Now you want to take it to the 250 crores. Now your asset, if you're using it, your same asset for 3 resources, then you're able to deliver more ROI versus the current scenario. Okay. Other part is let's say I have to extend this from one geography to other geography. I need to hire a different team, let's say in the Germany or Europe. Okay. In that case, I have to again estimate how much money I have to pour in to build this team. So everything will actually go into the entire ROI section, which is return on investment, on what projects do I need to choose, which PM do I need to give this to, what is the time estimate of delivery, and how much is the return that I'm able to get, let's say, in the next 3 to 6 months, or let's say in the next 1 year, which is typically the cycle, appraisal cycle for us in India. Second part is that you need to think beyond a single feature. Earlier, you wanted to build a module, you want to launch a feature, but now the next part is in order to maximize ROI, you need to start thinking on how you can balance your portfolio of projects. Okay, how the different features connect with each other, and that will ensure that if there are synergies, then you can actually cut down certain costs in some section or cut down the time to market. That will mean that you can deliver things faster. So if you're able to realize those synergies, you'll be able to deliver faster and deliver better than the market if you are able to realize the synergies and your team capabilities better. Second, as a product manager, let's say you are handling only one module, buyer experience. But now you have to look at seller experience, payments, category management, shared services, ERP, Now you cannot be an expert in each from the day one, right? So in that case, of course, what you need to do is you need to bridge those gaps. Okay, one is that of course it will take some time, but when you pick up the projects, keep on understanding the impact of one module on the other. Okay, you need to look at the documentation that you have, talk to different PMs, talk to different cross-functional teams, and once you are able to realize that something can be used from one section to the other, you are able to actually maximize the ROI between them. Okay, so in larger organizations, this is very important because you're talking about 100 plus, 250 plus product managers. Each person is working on one, let's say, particular module, and let's say they all report to 8 to 10 different directors. Now, there, of course, you can't be an expert in everything, but as you keep on delivering and talking to each of them and engaging with them, you will be gradually working on delivering and bridging your product knowledge gap. Now, third part is how do I choose products or choose projects to launch? Now, we have one thing called North Star. Now, your vision is defined. I want to be a market leader in the next 10 years. Okay, and for that, let's say the North Star is GMV. Okay, I want to deliver 50,000 crores of GMV in 1 year. So let's say that's the North Star. Currently, let's say I'm at 100 crores. Okay. So now everything that I do has to have will deliver or move towards the North Star. Okay, so that will help us to reduce the friction between the teams and also help you in decision making. Okay, so let's say you pick up one project which was helping you in improving user experience, but actually was not helping in improving GMV, or let's say was reducing the GMV. Okay, so in that case, of course, you'll be able to deliver better and understand better if you have to pick up that product or not. And therefore, it's very helpful to have a North Star. Now, there could also be certain tactical initiatives. Okay, for instance, you want to launch a new category. That category, of course, let's say could be a 3 or 6 month roadmap. Now, that is a tactical initiative. Okay, and therefore the allocation or the bandwidth that you have to allocate will be very different from what you actually do, let's say for a 1 or 2 year project. And therefore the ROI mindset will also have to be slightly different. Okay, so let's say I will give you a personal example here. So for instance, I was leading a module called Orange Book Value, so the pricing engine. Now for us, our entire focus was on delivering and making it the de facto pricing standard, which actually meant that all the dealers in India, 3 lakh plus dealers in India, auto dealers in India, should use OBV as a pricing engine baseline. Now, what that meant was in the initial years, we wanted to keep the entire system free. Okay, so everything that we used to do was about increasing awareness, visibility, making it widely accessible. Okay, but at the end, when we realized that there was no revenue coming out of it, okay, but that was fine because for the next 5 to 6 years, we'll now focus on revenue. Okay, and therefore, what I'm trying to say is today there are different funnels. Okay, a lot of companies are actually bleeding money. They're not making money. They're actually not focusing on profitability. But then that's an approach they have taken. That's a strategy approach they have taken. Okay, so on one hand, let's say you have companies of bleeding crores of money to reach a certain goal, but in the next 3 to 6 years, they will have to come back again to that goal of being profitable. So as a product manager or a director, your approach will become very different. You have to maximize your ROI and enjoy return to the different stakeholders. Okay, so as I transition, as you see, we are transitioning from 1 and 2. Now we'll move to the next section, which is about how do you train your team, right? So here, of course, we're talking about you see there cannot be any implementation without your team, right? So when you train your team, you have to train your team to maximize the output. So the first thing you need to do as a person who enters into leadership, assess your team capabilities. Okay, there are different methods to doing that. You can talk to them. You can look at your resumes, the projects they have done in the past. Okay, so that will help you to assess what are the team hiring you need to do. Okay, other part to understand is that today product management is evolving very fast. There are a lot of people today, more opportunities coming in. Okay, more companies are hiring today. But again, you have to understand that it takes time to build projects. Okay, it takes time to build new products, and therefore you have to look at people with the right mindset plus the right attitude. So that is also very important when you look at team hiring. And second part is that earlier it was about your value contribution, but now it is about your team value contribution, right? So we have to also look at what are the different KPIs your team is looking at in terms of measuring the output, right? So you have to look at in terms of what value you can deliver as a team and help you improve that output as you go along. Okay. And so, for instance, let's say you're talking about launching new categories, right? So, let's say a particular PM has more experience in launching new categories, but the other PM is, let's say, relatively new. In that case, you have to look at how will you allocate those projects based on the current versus expected capabilities. Okay, in that case, either you have to train them, upskill them, or let's say, or at least tell them that these areas are your areas of improvement, and you can build them as they go along, right? So, of course, there are people who are joining from colleges, people are joining from other companies, and other part is that every company is actually unique, right? There are a lot of people today who are joining from, let's say, startups to bigger companies, or moving from one way to the other. And but every company is unique, every product is unique, and therefore it does take some time for you to adjust and move to the new organization. So you have to also really understand how you can actually ramp up the resources faster to and look at how you can allocate them in a better fashion. Uh, Fourth part is, of course, you have to enable the team members with skills to lead their team to success. Okay. So there are people who will do, let's say, better than others. In order to help them to on the right path, you have to enable them with by clearing the path, influencing other people. Okay, talking to the different stakeholders in the organization, both upwards and downwards. And this is a role which will come up very important because in a fast-paced organization, a lot of clarity comes along as you building, right? So there will be priority clashes. A roadmap is not properly built. Okay, a lot of times, let's say there are you want to launch a tactical initiative versus a strategy initiative. So all these things will come up. So you have to enable them at the right time, and also be a team player when it comes to helping your team deliver the maximum output. You have to also build your team morale, right? So of course there will be misses, there will be wins, right? So of course experimentation is another thing that we do a lot in product management, especially when you are dealing with projects that have already been launched for some time. Okay, so for instance, you have to launch a new feature. In that case, you like to do a lot of experimentation. Should I launch an app? Should I launch a website first? What should be the pricing? Okay, should I give it to my existing users? Should I give it to the first time users? So all these things have a lot of things around experimentation, and it is very critical for you to experiment. Otherwise, of course, we can't actually tell what would be successful. So in that case, there are misses and wins, and it's important to keep your team morale up. Okay, by engaging with them, talking to them very openly and frequently, and therefore helping team build a team morale, because there will be ups and downs. There will be cases of high workload versus low workload. So it is very important for you to understand that these are very things that will be there as you go along. Okay, so fourth is, of course, I talked about allocating resources and influencing others. Okay, so large part of your work is also about how do you allocate resources and influence people. Okay, so the first part to talk about is uh, the equation is not too simple. Okay, it doesn't mean that you acquire all the resources that come to you. Okay, so more ownership doesn't mean more success. So let's say there's a team meeting and you want to talk about allocating 6 resources to your project. In that case, it doesn't mean you talk about acquiring 4 resources for the entire project. You have to pick up the right resources actually. You have to look at the right projects, the right attitudes, can they deliver? And therefore, what I'm talking is doesn't mean that you pick up 4 resources or not able to deliver, or more ownership is not equal to more success. Second part is you have to continuously influence people up and down. Okay, when I mean up and down, you're talking about people under you who are engineers, let's say, who are people who are PMs or data analysts working under you. You have to convince them, because you see, when you're building projects which are, let's say, new age innovation, typically you don't have a precedent. Okay, a lot of times you're taking a gut chance that this will work. You're building hypothesis, you're doing experiments, doing pilots, A/B testing. So you have to also influence people on why this is the right approach, and while you also do it as a PM, but as you move along as a product leader, you have to also influence the people above you, right? Because in that case, you're using the resources of the company, and therefore you have to make sure that you only work on those projects which are important. Other element is that in larger organizations, there are dependencies. Okay. So let's say you are a product leader, but then you are also working with cross-functional teams. Your marketing team, category, HR, finance, promotions. Okay, let's say you have a finance. All of these are different teams. They have different attributes to work on. Now your dependency is on them, right? You want to launch a new category. Let's say you're launching a new category called, let's say, used phones. In that case, the first thing you need to do is talk to the marketing team to understand what does the market need, what is the market research talking about. Second part is once you are certain that you talk about how do I launch. Okay, so there's a strategy team involved. Okay, you talk to them, build out a plan. Third is you need to go to your business head or it's the category team management person that I want to launch this category. These are different plans that I have. What do you think about it? Okay, let's say he says I want to go ahead. Okay, or let's say he asks for more data. Then the analytics teams come into the picture. So it's not so simple, and therefore you as you move along, you realize that there are a lot of dependencies that you need to work on. So you're continuously navigating across those dependencies and talking to different people, convincing them, and also taking a buy-in as you move along the organization level. And in most cases, you realize there are blockers coming in from your own team, from companies or as a team within the same company, because they have not understood the problem or they have not been able to talk to you to understand what actually you are doing. So influencing, talking, communicating is very, very important. And you have to navigate across different dependencies. Third is, of course, you're talking about more data and analysis, right? So as you move from a new age, so of course, a new age company, let's say a startup has just launched. In that case, you may not have a lot of data coming in. Okay, so to do probably some hypothesis testing, look at some probabilistic scenarios also. But in case of companies that are already there for a few years, in that case, you need to look at data and also do more analysis. Okay, so of course, data and analysis will give out a larger picture that will help you to deliver the entire picture to your organizational management so that you can actually look at allocating resources in a better fashion. At the same time, you have to be receptive to what your higher management is saying because, of course, they have a larger view on things. There are business priorities that probably as a listed company or a startup funded company you need to talk about to your investors, right? So as a leader grows up, you have to also realize there are different views and perspectives, internal view, stakeholders, your management, your board management. Okay, then there are people who are funding you, investors. So all of these things need to be also looked at. And of course, last part as I mentioned about is you need to talk about. So earlier you're thinking about yourself, right? How can you gain more personal scope? How can I build my own visibility in the company? That was the earlier aspect of being a product manager, right? So in that case, of course, you're talking about taking higher visibility projects or leading a certain module, let's say leading a certain geography or category. So as Ravi, he was let's say talking about his own growth, but now he has to focus on the organizational growth plus his team growth, and therefore he has to right size his scope by shedding parts of his responsibility, which essentially means that let's say earlier I was doing more hands-on work, right? I was more operational work, tactical work. Now you have to move from that and move towards being a more strategic plus a operations guy. You have to look at more strategically things. You have to look at the metrics. Okay, you have to look at which project you can need to pick up first. So all of that is about looking at your scope. Okay, you're changing your definition from a operations guy to a strategic guy. Okay, so for that you need to right size your scope by shedding parts of your responsibility. Second part is as you move from individual to team visibility, there are a lot of aspects you need to talk about. Okay, so let's say there are 6 to 8 members for Ravi. Now every member may have a certain KRA. Okay, but let's say not every KRA is important today. So he has to balance their entire team visibility in terms of giving them the right projects. Okay, or let's say highlighting to the right team members the work he is doing. Or let's say there's a small win or quick win he has delivered. So let's highlight him, or let's say give him a spot award, or let's say recognize him through small initiatives. So all of that will really help in two things. One is you're building your team morale, and other is also improving your uh, visibility in terms of overall development and delivery. So that is very important. Okay. Third is that you have to enable new teams around you. Okay. Third, so let's say there are different functions that you're building, right? So you have one is new teams, okay, and you have current teams. So new teams, I say, for instance, you're building a new project. Now for that, you need to probably do some R&D or market research. Now, one thing I can enable my team to do that, or I could ask either a new team to pick up a project, or maybe give it to a third party. Okay, so you need to enable new teams to work around them, and also look at what is the cost effectiveness around that. Okay. Fourth and most other part is systems and processes. Okay, you need to define systems and processes to identify problems to course correct or escalate. Now, in a startup, when you're building something new, okay, the first part is, and today what we call is the MVP approach or the lean startup approach. Okay, where you're more focused on agile methodology and delivering larger projects into smaller agile based projects. Now, that is something that could work. Okay, but in some cases, talking about how you can develop a larger system or process, it will take some certain months for you to document. So first step is documentation, defining a system of, or let's say, taking feedback from the customer. Okay, third is taking up new feedback mechanisms like NPS. Okay, that will help you to identify the right problems to course correct or escalate. Okay, because let's say at an organization level, your revenue is increasing, but let's say at your level, the retention data is showing that people are not delivering well, right? So in that case, the larger aspect is what system and processor I need to continuously define to course correct or escalate. Okay. So when I say escalate, what does escalation mean? So for instance, a PM is working under Ravi. Okay. Now let's say he discovered an issue in terms of people moving out of cart at the e-commerce section and they're not able to convert. Right. So in that case, first thing that he needs to do is understand what is the reason. At the same time, he needs to course correct or let's say communicate to his manager Ravi that the issue is there and he's working on it. Okay. Now, third portion of escalation will be where when he gets the issue or let's say understands the issue, he escalates to let's say Ravi, and Ravi understands let's say this is a cross-functional issue. In that case, we will have to report it to the cross-functional team and come together to solve that particular issue. So that process has to be there in terms of escalation, okay, course correction, okay, how do you define or identify certain problems, and therefore it will help the organization deliver better versus your current status. I'll also talk about one thing which we talked about a lot in rooms. So our CEO used to talk about that. So steady state versus status quo. So steady state is where you are delivering for the larger vision, right, for the next 3 to 5 years. Okay, whereas status quo, let's say current situation is delivering for the next few months. So in that case, the approach became different, right? So for instance, in some cases, you realize that the cost per acquisition is very highly high. In the next 5 years, we can't actually sustain that. But in the next few months, if your focus is activation or let's say getting more customers, the high CPA might still work. And therefore, in that case, you don't need to escalate, but you still need to understand that the CPA needs to go down. Otherwise, you run out of funding. Let's say you may not have enough marketing budget to acquire more customers. So in that case, you need to course correct. Okay. So of course, so as Ravi, as you can see, I'll just recap in terms of what we talked about. So what changes? One is depth in types of his product work. From a specialist, he's becoming a generalist. He has to lead a team. He's becoming a team leader. Okay, and therefore he has to look at different multiple types of product work as he goes ahead. Second, from an individual contributor, he's becoming a group performer. He's becoming a performance leader. So earlier he was good at his job. Now he has to train and empower people under him to deliver more than actually what he was delivering. And his own individual performance will not matter now versus his group performance. Because that is how the transition has moved from IC to a group performer level. Third, earlier he could crib about, let's say, resources not being available, or let's say people not being hired. But now he is the one who has to get the system to hire new people. Okay, and therefore it is about team building, team allocation, influencing people, and talking about the different issues and solving them as he goes there. Now he as a leader has to communicate to the top management, I want new people, why I want them, what is the business case, if not, what do I do, okay, what is the loss, all of that has to be done by him, and therefore there's a strategic view that he needs to take at the larger level. Okay, and other part is he has to continuously influence and buy in other teams and cross-functional teams. And of course, lastly, he has to gain more moving from a personal visibility and scope. He has to move towards creating more organizational scope, looking at more organizational growth capabilities. Okay, working with the top management to ensure the team is able to deliver on the right vision. And therefore, what changes for Ravi is these 5 different things. And if he's able to deliver all of them, he's able to succeed in this larger goal of becoming a PA or a product leader. So of course, that is a bit about in terms of what I had to talk about. We'll also like to wish Ravi all the best. Of course, Ravi has just changed. I'm sure you are a lot of people who are listening here are also Ravi. I'm sure you are able to understand a bit about from my experiences and what I had. And I wish Ravi all the best and also wish all the best. Now, of course, there are a couple of Q&As that have been posted in the chat. So let me take that. And then, of course, we can also have an open mic session where you can ask more questions in this particular topic. So there are two questions. One is by Naveen. Okay, so he's talking about while we make X product for the general public, we also have a B2B division. Kindly suggest, as per your experience, how to juggle both the markets from product perspective. Okay, so you're talking about B2C versus B2B basically, right? So a B2C view is very different. Okay, consumer internet view is very different. You're talking about acquiring an individual customer, servicing them, and then of course retaining them over the lifetime of the lifetime value. Now, a B2B team, of course, is where you're talking to a specific distribution channel, or let's say a particular, let's say, company that is dealing with you on the B2B business. Okay, so let's define this better. So let's say you are in Zipcart. Okay, now what will B2B mean? Now B2B will mean two things. One is either it is your dealers or the sellers who are listing new inventory on your platform. That is also B2B. Other aspect of B2B is the brands or the OEMs who are listing on your platform. Let's say you have a fashion category and you have Alan Solly, Van Essen listing on your platform. Now that's also B2B. So when you say B2B, there are two different aspects. One is your internal seller experience. Other is your outside customers, or let's say your partners, or let's say your distribution channels. So when you talk about B2B, one is that there are less number of people to talk to. They have very specific requirements, and therefore the provision of documenting the requirements becomes easier. You can talk to them, understand the requirements, and of course you can go ahead much easier versus a B2C. Because a B2C typically would have lakhs of customers coming to a platform, and you can divide them into cohorts or customers in terms of user personas. But typically a B2B persona is easier to handle. Okay. So first and foremost, you can talk to them, document the requirements better, easier, and you can implement the requirements better. And you can keep on taking feedback from them as we move along. But in a B2C perspective, that becomes very different. There are multiple user personas, different geographies, territories. Okay, and therefore the mechanism of taking feedback and product development becomes very different. So the best way to do that is develop the user personas. Okay, take feedback or NPS, identify the weak point in the system, and continuously keep on evolving as you develop the more features or products. So you're rightly saying B2C is very different from B2B, and B2B typically I would say is more stabler. It takes more longer time to develop, but it is typically more stable. So I hope I'm able to answer your question here. Second question is from Disha. So what are the career opportunities for a product manager as a fresher? So I would say, Disha, today I think the market is very ripe in terms of opportunities. A couple of years back, it was only a couple of people from IT background or developer background who were getting those opportunities. As a fresher, there are a lot of opportunities in terms of startups hiring you or college hiring happening at different traditional companies. So, for instance, startups are also looking at people who are graduates. In fact, today I'm seeing a lot of people in the colleges also working on different startup projects. So, I think today opportunity is right. As more and more startups come in, they're looking at people who can intern, who can work with them as data analysts, as business analysts, or even junior product managers to work with them. And they're also relaxing the guidelines of getting or hiring these people. So, in order to build a good profile, here are a couple of suggestions. One, so first of all, understand if you're really built for product management. Okay, today it's a buzzword. In the next 5 years, it will change. Okay, in my last when I was joining my college, the buzzword was about investment banking or consult. Of course, today it's about product management. In the next 5 years, it will be about AI, or let's say something else, or let's say Bitcoin. So first, understand whether you want to actually work in the PM field or not. And the best way to do that is do an internship or a side project, or build, or let's say talk to some people who are, let's say, having this knowledge in this experience domain, and understand what is the typical day-to-day operations like. Not everybody is a coder. Not everybody is developing something. Okay, and there's a lot of work to be done. You're talking to different stakeholders. There's a business guy, technology guy, design guy, data guy. You're at the center of that particular ecosystem. So think whether you can manage that. And second, do live projects and internships. And third, work on new opportunities and technologies that will help you get featured faster in terms of getting hired. So my view is today's opportunities are very, very high. And not only Indian companies, but also foreign companies are also looking at Indian talent in a big fashion. So I think that is the best, right? Today is the best time for you to look at product management even as a fresher. So yeah, so I will pause a bit. If you have any other questions, happy to take them. And happy to take any more questions on product management. And I think I can now open your mic and also ask as the NIMS team may allow. But happy to take any other question that you may have. Okay, so we have one question from Shishti. It says, for a profile like product manager, I hope startups prefer people having a good experience of number of years. Because as you said, nowadays business want to excel very fast. So, Shrishti, my response to this is, what you're saying is definitely right. But then there is a different element to that as well. One is people with certain experience, they have certain way of working. Okay, and in a startup, things are moving very fast. So we have seen people who have, let's say, low experience or even fresher experience, they are able to adjust very fast and deliver fast. So there are different trade-offs that we look at, right? So there are people who are young, they come with a different fresh perspective. They're able to learn very fast and deliver. Okay, so when we're looking at people, especially for startups, we are looking at people who can deliver very fast, who don't are not getting issues with ambiguity. Okay, but when we look at experience, specifically with relevant experience, there are very few people, and therefore today startups are more and more open to look at freshers or people from diverse backgrounds who can work in the different domains. So there are different trade-offs, and I think it basically means that opportunities are more and more for different people from different domains to also work in different segments. So for instance, I was working in automotive earlier. Now I'm working in rent in the rent vertical or the real estate vertical. Okay, so for the opportunities are very different. They are very fluid today, and nobody is stopping you from moving across sectors. Okay, and let's say when somebody questions me, let's say why I want to move from one segment to the other, my response is I'm building apps, I'm building websites. Okay, it doesn't matter to me who is on the other side, as long as I understand what problem I'm solving. So the problem user persona is very important. Once I'm able to understand that, it doesn't matter to me because the technology is the same, right? There is an app to be developed, there are categories to be launched, there is metrics to be tracked. So everything else remains the same. So that case, opportunities are more and more ripe. And I think as there's a shortage of talent coming in the market, the opportunities will only increase. And as more and more startups, unicorns coming in, I'm going to see more and more opportunities being released for freshers, as well as people with low experience, let's say 1 or 2 years. Yeah. So any other question that you may have, you can open your mics as well. And you can also write any Q&A in the Q&A section. So any other questions that you may have, like Disha or points that you have in your mind, let's say, Naveen, we can be happy to answer that. And also happy to answer any question on the topic today we discussed. I think this document will also be shared with you, and there's also YouTube recording. You can look at that as well. Okay, so we'll wait for a few seconds, more seconds to look at the Q&A. And you can also open your mic and ask any question you may have. And this could be anything about product management or let's say the topic. I'm happy to answer any general question also. And the idea is that you're able to understand and appreciate the leadership term better, transitioning term better. Okay. Thank you, everyone. It was a great interacting with all of you, and hopefully it was a good session for all of you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, faculty at NIMS. Thank you.